All right, so today we're going to try something a little different. We're not just going to break down a huge scientific breakthrough. We're also going to look at how you even begin to explain something this complex. We're going to explore the art of science communication, and our guide will be one of the most amazing stories in neuroscience today, the quest to map the human brain.
So, where do you start with any great story? Well, you need a hook, right? It's got to be a question or an idea that's so compelling it just opens up this curiosity gap and makes you lean in because you have to know the answer. For this story, that hook is all about scale.
Okay, so let's try it. I want you to picture a tiny piece of your brain, your cerebral cortex, that's literally no bigger than a single grain of rice. What do you think is actually in there? How much information could possibly be packed into a space that small? Well, the answer is pretty staggering, and it sets the stage for everything else.
That's the answer, 1.4 petabytes of data. Now, to give you some perspective, a whole high-definition movie is maybe 4 gigabytes. This tiny speck of brain tissue could hold the equivalent of 350,000 of those movies. It's just mind-boggling. And look, this isn't just like an empty hard drive. No, it is a living, bustling city of 57,000 cells, neurons and other support cells, and they're all linked together by 150 million individual connections. This ridiculously dense network is the data set, it's called HO1, that a team from Google and Harvard University has just finished mapping.
So now that we're hooked on the sheer complexity of it all, what's next? Well, any good explainer needs to give you some context. To really get why this new map is such a monumental achievement, we first have to understand the journey to get here. And the best way to do that is with a really good analogy.
And this is just a brilliant way to picture the challenge. Think about it. If mapping the brain of a tiny worm is like measuring an airline seat, and a fruit fly's brain is like lining up a few jumbo jets, then mapping a mouse brain, which is still a fraction of a human's, is like plotting the entire flight path from Boston to Lisbon. You can just see how the difficulty explodes.
And in this timeline, wow, it just shows you how fast things are accelerating. The very first complete brain map, or connectome, of that little worm was published way back in 1986, and it took over a decade of painstaking manual work. Now, fast forward to 2020, and with a big assist from AI, researchers map a piece of a fruit fly brain with 25,000 neurons. And just 4 years after that, we have this human cortex sample. Technology, specifically AI, has completely changed the game.
So we get the scale of it, but how? How on earth did they actually do this? A good explainer doesn't just wave its hands and say science. It breaks down the process into simple, understandable steps, turning this massive technical challenge into something you can actually follow.
The process itself is just a masterpiece of precision. First, they take the tissue sample and slice it into over 5,000 pieces, each one thinner than a human hair. Then they take an image of every single slice with a powerful electron microscope. The next challenge is all digital, stitching those thousands of images together into one big 3D block. And then comes the heaviest lift of all. They let AI algorithms loose on the data to trace every neuron and identify every single one of those 150 million connections.
And this slide right here perfectly shows that final, critical step. On the left, that's the raw data from the microscope. It's just a chaotic gray mess, right? It's almost impossible to tell where one cell ends and another one begins. But on the right, that's what the AI creates, a fully segmented, color-coded map. Every neuron, every synapse is identified. It turns all that noise into a world of knowledge we can actually explore.
Okay, so after the how, we get to the what. This is the payoff. Once you've got the map, what can you see that you could never see before? This is where we get to share the really surprising results that make all that effort worth it.
I mean, the map itself is just breathtaking. As you can see from this image, it is not a neat little diagram. It's a dense, tangled forest of connections. And hidden deep inside this microscopic jungle, researchers found some truly bizarre structures that neuroscientists had never seen before in a human brain.
For instance, they confirmed that support cells, called glia, actually outnumber the main neuron cells 2 to 1. They found these incredibly rare but super powerful links where one neuron would make up to 50 connections with just one other neuron. They also found strange neurons deep in the cortex arranged in these perfect mirror image patterns. And maybe the weirdest of all, these beautiful but bizarre axon whorls, where a neuron's wiring tangles up into these intricate knots. And the crazy thing is, we have no idea what they do.
Now, here's a really critical part of honest science communication. You have to admit what you don't know. After all the exciting discoveries, you have to talk about the limitations. It builds trust, and it paints a much more complete picture of the science.
And here is the biggest caveat for the HO1 dataset. The tissue sample came from a surgery to treat epilepsy. So that raises a huge question. Are these mysterious whorls and these superpowered connections a feature of all human brains, or are they somehow related to the patient's condition? Right now, we simply don't have a normal map to compare it to. This is just the very first data point.
And that leads us to the final and maybe most important part of any good explainer, the future. Why does this all matter? Where does this research lead? This is where we connect it all back to the big questions and the grand challenges that we all care about.
One of the most exciting paths forward is actually the link to artificial intelligence. You know, today's AI needs to see millions of examples of something to learn what it is. But you, a biological intelligence, you can often learn from just one or two examples. The brain's wiring diagram is the blueprint for that incredible efficiency.
Ultimately, when you step back, these maps just open up so many incredible possibilities. They could give us a baseline to finally understand the physical changes behind disorders like Alzheimer's. They could reveal how our memories are literally encoded into the connections between our neurons. And yes, they could provide the blueprint for a whole new generation of artificial intelligence, one that learns as efficiently as we do.
And that really brings us to the end. The best explainers don't just summarize. They leave you with a final big question that opens the door to even bigger ideas. We have finally built a tool that can read the brain's intricate language. The only question now is, what secrets will we find written there?